I was in school with Phil in a place called Crumlin in Dublin, and it was a fairly big, Christian Brothers school. There was about maybe 2,000 people in there. There was this one guy that just stuck out because he was black, and it was the only black guy in the whole school, which was Phil. And a friend of mine said, Phil plays in a band. It's called the band's called Black Eagles. And I said, oh yeah, I've heard about them. They're actually playing down in the local cinema, which is the Apollo Cinema. Every Saturday night, he had a kind of a residency down there. Why don't we go down and check them out? So I asked my dad to give me, I think it was 2 and sixpence or something to get into it. And he kind of grudgingly gave it to me, So I went down there and with my friend, we tried to get up as close to the front as possible. And when they came on, I didn't recognise Phil. He totally changed, had lovely clothes. And he had this glove, I remember, he used to wear this black glove. And he used to hold a microphone because he never played bass at this stage, it was really, really, really good. And the crowd went crazy, it went wild. I sort of seen him in school the next Monday, and I plucked up the courage to go over and say, listen, Phil, that was really, really a good gig. He said, oh, thanks a lot, So I said, I play drums as well, and I've got a kind of a small band as well around Crumlin, where he lived as well. And he says, oh yeah, he says, come down with your kit, and I put in a good word for you. So he obviously did, and after about 2 numbers, I did this number called You Really Got Me by the Kinks. And, after about 6 or 7 bars of this, they all went, stop, I went, oh, I must have done something wrong. He says, that's great, our drummer couldn't play that beat, So that gave me lots of encouragement, So after a couple of numbers, they just stopped and said, yeah, that's okay, we're playing in the local St. Paul's Hall, I think it was, in a place called Mount Argus in Dublin. Next Saturday, available? And I said, of course I'm available, yeah. So we just started rehearsing then, just straight away. After Black Eagles broke up, Phil was asked to join a band called Skid Row with a guy called Bruce Shields. And he asked me as well, I was playing in a band called the Sugar Shack at this stage as well, after Black Eagles broke up. I was asked to join a band called the Sugar Shack, which is basically a blues band. So I just kept in contact with Phil. We used to drink together down in Grafton Street in Dublin. And but eventually he got fired, for some reason. He either got fired or he left. I'm not really sure the actual story there, but he wasn't playing anyway. So I met him in Dublin, in town as well, around that time. And he says, look, I'm doing nothing. And I said, well, I think our band is kind of breaking up as well, for shortly. He says, yeah, why don't we do something together, Phil had a couple of tunes written at this stage. And we sort of went over those a few times and it sounded pretty good, So we decided to keep that band together for a while. Eric Bell came down to one of our gigs and saw the band and came backstage later and said, look, I've left my band. I think you need me in the band, Let's forget the orphanage and form a new band. And I was a little bit apprehensive about this, and I said it to Phil, and I said, look, we're doing okay, He said, yeah, let's give Eric a go, So we had these sort of secret rehearsals in some guy's garage, somewhere out of town. And it actually sounded really, really good. So we decided to get Eric in. And, really sort of the rest is history. We rehearsed in this place called the Countdown Club in Dublin. And we were sort of wrecking our brains to trying to find a name for the band, And Eric Bell comes up and, what don't we call it? Tin Lizzy, Tin Lizzy, And everybody goes, yeah, but that's a female robot in the Beano, comic book. Yeah, and Phil goes, well, why don't we just change it a little bit? Let's put an H in there, call it Thin Lizzy, and confuse all the Irish people, They won't be able to pronounce it Thin Lizzy, it'd be Tin Lizzy anyway, So that's how that came about. We had a German tour coming up and we didn't have a guitar player. So Phil decided to phone up a couple of friends of his, and we found out that John Cann and Andy G were available. We sort of 2 or 3 days to rehearse, and then the tour started. So we had to just get those guys, no matter how they played, just to sort of do the tour of Germany. They were great guitar players, but just didn't suit the band, And we decided there and then that when we got back to London, we'd sort of break the band up, and sort of start afresh and put out the word that we needed 2 more guitar players. So we had these really long auditions. Eventually, Brian Robertson came down on the recommendation of Charlie McLennan, who eventually became our road manager. And when he came down, he knew all our first and second album. from Decca, and so obviously he was chosen.
My best friend who I went to school with, a guy called Big Charlie, he went off roading for all sorts of people, but he ended up with Lizzy. And when they were looking for a guitar player, I'd already seen an advert in Melody Maker for a drummer, so I went down with my guitar and my drumsticks. It was kind of weird because I more or less got the gig as a drummer. But then a week later, I went up and rehearsed with the boys, and I had to go back to their band and say, sorry, I can't play with you, so I'm playing guitar with them. They didn't know how to play guitar, right? And the weirdest thing was, it was about one tour later, 2 tours later, it was that band that were supporting us. It was all very strange.
When I grew up, a lot of it was a lot of surf music, a lot of R&B, that kind of thing to listen to. But when I was 13 years old, it's when the Beatles hit, and the dam broke, and this new thing called the British invasion hit, the West Coast, and I was totally in love with it. I mean, I just thought it was the greatest thing ever. It had always become sort of, the dream of mine to travel to this mystical island called England. I didn't really know where it was on the map, because I hadn't bothered to look at this point. But when I did find, where England was, I couldn't believe that, that many bands and that many talented people all came from one place. This essentially this island. And I just thought, what an incredible place to a place like this to produce that much talent, in that short a space of time. So how I got to England was my then brother-in-law had joined he had gone to England, and he joined this band called Supertramp. And he goes, I think if you came over, I think I might be able to get you in the band as the guitar player. I didn't know that until I actually landed in London, that it wasn't going to happen. So here I am in London. I've got really no money. I've got my little Japanese Les Paul copy, and all dressed up and nowhere to go, So the best thing that probably happened to me is I found myself being able to turn into this different person. I could be this more outgoing, pushy kind of guy because my visa only said 6 months on it. And really, if I made an asshole of myself, I knew I was going to get on the airplane. I was never going to see anybody again, but hey, at least I gave it a try. So that's what I did. I became this different sort of person. I was able to push myself a lot further than I ever would have done in my own hometown. I met a lot of different people, a lot of different musicians and people who lived around London. And one of the guys that I did meet was a guy named Rowan O'Loughlin, who was Irish. So he knew Phil and said, listen, I know of this band who's looking for a guitar player. Do you want me to put your name in to go down and have a jam? And I said, well, yeah, well, who are they? He said, well, it's an Irish band. I thought, geez, Irish? I don't know anything about that, right? And he said, they're called Thin Lizzy. And I'd never heard of them.
He hadn't got a clue about Thin Lizzy, he never even heard of Whiskey in the Jar, which was a big hit at that stage. But he didn't know about it because he's from America and he wasn't long in London, so he didn't really know about Lizzy.
My question to Rowan was, well, how much are they paying? And he said, well, I think they're going to be paying about 30 quid a week. I thought, wow, how cool is that? Because I'm making 12 right now.
And when he came down, we looked at him. He'd long hair. His hair was down to here. It was really long. And he walked in, and everybody went, followed him as he walked in the room, And he took out his guitar, and we thought it was a Les Paul, but it was a Les Paul copy,
I looked at the other two guys. You could see them almost rolling their eyes back. And, oh, Christ, man, what do we got here, And
he strapped this on, but he played quite good, It was really so we just played sort of a couple of numbers that we didn't. It's kind of blues numbers. We didn't even rehearse. We just jammed them, And he jammed quite well. So, but at that stage, Phil just disappeared. He said, "Hang on, I'll be back in about 5 minutes."
I actually thought I'd blown it. I didn't think I'd done a very good job, and I thought, well, so I went back to my mentality. Well, at least I gave it a shot. As I was closing the lid, Phil said, "So, can I get your telephone number?" Ooh, maybe I'm in with a chance here, right? I said, "Yeah," and I scribbled it down, and we all shook hands, and I left. As I was sitting in the flat that night around 10 o'clock in the evening, Phil called me up and said, "So, tell you what, we've been all listening to your stuff." So they'd been recording it, and I hadn't known that. We've all been listening to what's been going on today, and we just want to know, do you want to join the band? And I just about jumped down the phone, to try to say yes. I couldn't say quick yes or no, because what we were playing on the day was absolutely the coolest music I'd ever been involved with up to that point, and I really wanted in a really huge way. So when he said, "Do you want in?" Bam, yeah, I want in. He wanted 2 lead guitar players right off the bat, and there were reasons for that. Apparently on one tour with Eric Bell. Unfortunately, Eric, I don't know what happened there, but he quit in the middle of the set and just stormed off, right? And which left Brian and Phil to finish the set. He was probably the first drum and bass thing that actually went down, but he actually finished the set that way. And I guess he vowed that was never going to happen again. If somebody got a little diva-like and stormed off, well, there's another guy to actually keep the proceedings going. So.
The Julie guitars had a big influence, but also Phil was like a really good leader. He really said motivate you big time.
This is a big guy with a lot of sort of star quality to him. This guy's got something here. He's really takes command of the whole, the stage, the proceedings, what's going on. He's the focal point. So it wasn't real hard to recognize that.
Very charismatic guy, and very intense, in those days. I quite enjoyed that because I get a bit intense myself from time to time. A bit of clashing going on there somewhere. I mean, if he said anything against a song that he did, or something, I used to have wars with a man because he wanted to do it a certain way. I'm going, I'm not doing that. Refusing to play on tracks and stuff like that because he wanted them a certain way, But that's a bit of to and fro, and it kind of lends itself to energy, so to speak. Not destructive energy, but songs would happen because of the fact that we weren't agreeing on everything. So you go through and you look at whatever's there, and sometimes so we would go, okay, I've got you. And the other times it'd be, fuck off. And so it was kind of weird,
It's a funny thing, best friends can argue with each other. I mean, nose to nose, veins sticking out, really start screaming at each other, and it can be okay afterwards. If you don't know somebody that well, you can't really do that, And especially with a guy like Phil, most people probably wouldn't do that, but there was a thing between he and I that we knew that we could say anything we wanted to each other. We could get as mad as hell as we wanted to. We could scream, not punch, but we could scream, yell, really bring out any kind of emotion we want to. And afterwards, we would go out and have a drink, and everything would be okay. So we were great friends.
Nightlife was the first one we did together. It was a bit rushed, that one, because record companies, in those days they want 2 albums a year out of you, at least, and touring as well, so.
Well, we had, because of that first jam session I already knew that, there was probably more than half of the album already written. And the one great thing about Phil is, he didn't want just to be the sole writer.
Sometimes you come in with acoustic and just strum it to you, and as you do, and we just sit down and work something out for it. Very simple, but just the acoustic guitar and the vocal, right? Everything else was the boys. I don't think we get enough credit for it, to be honest.
You'd be in rehearsal and you would play some guitar riff and you go, what's that there? What's that? And I said, well, it's, and I'd show him, go, great, let's use that, and you come up with something else, you go, okay, let's add that, right? And all of a sudden now you became, a writing partner too. And he made it clear straight off the bat that any sort of songs you've got, ideas, whatever, don't be shy, bring them forward, He did want people to come in. He didn't want it to be Phil Lynott and Thin Lizzy. He wanted it to be Thin Lizzy, full stop.
All I wanted to do was go out and play the guitar and get wrecked. So when I didn't realise that you make all your money out of publishing. And when I found out, I'm looking at the back of the album cover and it's Lynott, 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 Lynott. I'm going, oh. Maybe it was, I don't know. I know it wasn't all Lynott. But he sparks a seed in you. That's the biggest thing. A lot of the arrangements were done by me and Scott. But he would spark it off and start it. Which is a knack in itself,
Brian was such a great guitar player back then that, and I figure I was probably at that point, a little less accomplished than Brian was. There would be really tough spots to try to get a lead guitar, and Phil would look at me and I'd go, no, why? Take it away, Brian, and he'd do it, and he did such a great job with it, Brian was a really great guitar player at that point. He had his sounds down. He had this really great style that people even to this day emulate. So he came up with some really, really great stuff.
Nice one, Scott.
We didn't really give much thought to it then, but I think really we were a live band. In the studio it was okay, but it was hard to capture that live feel. In the studio, it's a bit alien, for me.
Studio was a bit more abrasive, so to speak. But live, it was kicking. I always did with Lizzy live,
We just loved being out on the road. You'd be out there 6-7 months at a time, and you get to that 6 months, and your ass is dragging, and you're real tired, and you kind of can't wait to get home. And you realize that when you get home, you really don't have any home to go to. So within 2 weeks, you're calling up the office going, so when are we going back out on the road? So it was kind of this kind of strange cycle treadmill that we kept ourselves on. And we liked the treadmill. We liked the pain. We probably really should have, in fact, we should have, spent a lot more time in preparation for the albums, put the microscope on a little better, while we were spending all this money making the albums to be able to go out on the road. Well, we had a great fan base, because we'd been doing it now for a number of years, and it's we never thought of ourselves as that kind of band where, okay, we're not going to do Leicester because we can go over here and we can fill it, a place twice as big, so we don't need to do that. We didn't think in those terms. No, we will go do that, and we will do that, and we'll do that, and we won't miss out on anybody, And I think a difference that Phil actually made with the fans was he made sure that after every night, anybody that wanted to come back for a photograph or an autograph or a chat or anything, you come on back. And you'd see the disappointment on a lot of people's face. This is it? No confetti balloons or titties or what? Come on. We were on tour in America, and I don't know, we were in the asshole somewhere in the Midwest, right? And Phil and I was sitting in the car, and at this point, remember Peter Frampton Comes Alive? It was a live album. It was huge, absolutely huge in America. Every time you turned on the damn radio, there it was, show me the way, and you couldn't get away from it. Right? But credit to it was a good album, and it was a brave move that nobody had done really live albums at that point. And it was a huge hit. But the more it got played, the more it just pissed Phil off. He says, I don't get this. Listen to that audience. What the hell's that guy doing there? Is he like turning somersaults and cartwheels? Listen to that audience. He Says, I'm telling you, music-wise, it's not doing anything. Hell, we could do that. And we both kind of looked at each other and went silent, you know. And that's, he said, yeah, you know, we really could do that. You know, we could put out our own live album. We could do it better.
I think that was fairly obvious to the record company and to us as well, that it had to be done, you know. Because you really needed to catch that sort of spark that the band had, you know. And we knew we could do it, but being that sort of band, there's some bad nights. Because you're taking risks. If you don't, then it's just going to be stale. So I never play the same thing twice, which kind of weirds people out a bit, but I'm not enjoying it if I'm doing something, you know, written down like that.
The cool thing about being in that band was there were so many songs off of all those albums that we wanted to play live that we did. You know, I mean, at one point we were doing like 3-hour sets, you know, which were killer.
Well, the plan was basically to record the band as live. So we had the set, and we went out and did the set over and over again, you know, for about a year, I think. And threw the odd song in at sound checks as well, yeah, because we used to write a bit on the road at sound checks. But it was definitely always going to be a double album.
We had the material to be able to do something like that, to be able to do the double live thing. It would have been dead easy to say, well, here's 12 songs, thank you very much, and I gotta go, bye-bye, you know. But we figured if you're gonna put out a live situation, this is the live concert, this is the live experience. We figured that's the way to go. You do the whole set.
The Rainbow is such a icon of gigs. It was just before they closed it completely, I think. And it tends to have a better stage sound. I don't know why, but it does. I mean, some nights you can play in Hammersmith and it'll just sound like garbage. Then other nights it sounds great, you know. But the Rainbow always seems to be fairly consistent, you know.
Yeah, the Rainbow's a really great place for us to play. It was a fantastic venue. And we always got a great reaction in there. I think the Rainbow at that stage was a little bit more fashionable for some reason. I remember I went to see Frank Zappa there when he fell off the stage and all that. And, you know, so that's sort of, it was a pretty good venue, you know. It was like, and the Rainbow itself, the actual name is a good name, we thought, you know, so that's a good place to record, you know.
Rosalie came about, we had done a couple of tours with Bob Seger.
We supported Journey, I think it was, in America. Journey was topping the bill. I think we were second on the bill, and Bob Seger was third on the bill. But we got kind of really friendly with Bob and the band, and we used to check them out every night he played.
Yeah, he's great. And he's great live. He really was. He was the big change in him since those days. He was a wee bit more mellow, but they rocked. It was great.
Phil brought in this song. He goes, you know, we ought to try this Bob Seger song. I was like, whoa, hold on, man. We're gonna record something that was written by somebody else. Whoa. He goes, no, this is pretty cool song. It's real obscure. No, you know, nobody will really know.
Taking a well-known track and covering it is always a bit risky. But if they don't know the track and we do it our way, then, and you're not upsetting any Seeger fans either, are you? So.
And he puts this thing on, and it's like this, it's almost like a ballad. Ding, 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 ding. Phil, what the hell are you thinking about here? He goes, no, listen, we could speed it up. And he picked up his bass and doom, 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 doom. And that's when we, like, oh yeah, but then we go, you know, that kind of thing. So what we did, we took Bob Seger's song, we just pumped it up by another 6 or 7 levels, right? And put a lot more energy into it, and boom, you know, there it was. And it was a really cool song. And even to this day, that song is a great one to play on stage. Thanks, Bob.
obviously I hate it now. Because it's one of those things, if you spend your life playing the bloody thing, and that, you know.
The Boys Are Back in Town was like very sort of, was lucky to get on there, because at one stage we weren't going to put it on the record, you know. It was touch and go whether it was going to go on or not, because we had so many other good tunes there, you know. For the band, it was just another song, you know.
It's off the Jailbreak album. First two albums didn't sell a bean, right? And we're kind of nervous about this. So third album comes out, we go into rehearsals determined. And we probably went into this writing sessions for about 3 or 4 weeks with our little 8-track, recording system. And we came up with, I think it was 15 songs, right? And we knew we could only get 10 or whatever, because the groove thing, the quality thing, So we shortlisted the 10 songs that we thought were going to be the ones to make it. And, well, let's have one of the managers come down and have a listen, see what he thinks. And we played him all of the songs, right? And he said, well, I see here on the list, you don't have this song, what's it called here? The Boys Are Back in Town. You don't have that on your short list. I said, well, yeah. He goes, well, I actually like that one better than blah, blah, blah over here. I said, well, okay, well, there's one guy who likes that song. Okay, well, we'll put The Boys Are Back in Town, then we'll take that one out. And that was the one that obviously broke it for us in a worldwide sense. So
it was a pretty seminal part of things and a great single.
Well, Emerald came out of this Irish folky kind of 6/8, 12/8 kind of feel, which the Bodhrán players play in Ireland. The Bodhrán is a one drum which you hold from behind, and you have one stick, and you play it sort of with a wrist action, and you get a nice sort of tom-tom sound off it, but you get a tick-a-tick-a-tick-a-tick-a-tick, So Emerald was like based around that kind of tempo, Some of the chords and progressions were very Irish, and obviously the lyrics are very Celtic, So that's how that came about. Phil, at that stage, Phil was obviously reading a lot about people like Cuchulainn, who were sort of mythical Irish heroes from way back.
It's kind of one of Phil's sort of Celtic stories, so we had to give it a Celtic feel sort of thing, And that didn't seem too difficult either, But I used to love playing that one.
Emerald really was the first real sort of powerful, Irishy, Celtic kind of song that we came up for. We had other ones, but they were a bit lighter in weight, maybe a little more cutesy, Irishy. This was the first one that had the real hardcore edge to it, where real meaningful sort of guitars, drums, Phil. Once again, with his political and historic sort of background, threw that into the storyline. So it became this real sort of heavy Irish anthem, and it was a great song to play live. And once again, to this day, it still is.
Dancing in the Moonlight was another one of Phil's great lyrics, years ago we used to hang about a place called the Star Cinema in Crumlin, and it was a really sort of dodgy cinema, all sorts of weird people in there, but that's where we used to go, sort of people come up to you, and say, oh yeah, I like your gig and that, but you sit down, and when you get up off your seat, you be stuck to the seat, you got chewing gum and all sorts of stuff there, and that's where Phil got all these ideas for the song,
I didn't really like the song that much. It was a bit lightweight for me. Good melodies and everything else, right? But not quite where I wanted to go. But it was better live, to be honest, as far as I'm concerned.
For me, that was, that was all Phil, that one. And I just thought, boy, that's Phil. That's a way different direction here. Even that lyric, chocolate stains on my pants. The hell does that come from? But you know, it had this real, you know, catchy thing about it. It for me, it was an acquired love of the song. I didn't start to quite get the validity of it until probably really until we finished it. You know, I put the guitar solo on it, and I really liked the guitar solo. What I did, I really loved his vocal and what he was doing with it. So it all came together for me towards the end of actually recording it. Massacre is once again Phil's love of history, and for this particular song, it was the white Americans came along and just sort of unceremoniously started slaughtering the Indians to grab the land and make it their own. And Phil felt a real empathy towards the Indian nation of America, and that's where the Massacre came from.
Strange song again, but more of a percussive thing for Brian, really. I quite liked it. It was good. Again, it was good live.
Massacre was another full-blown rocker. It was kind of hard to play. You know, there's a few dodgy moments in there where, you know, the arrangement always kind of confused me a little bit. But after lots of rehearsal, I eventually got it. You know.
I'm still in love with you. Some people say
that was already written. In fact, it was already on the Nightlife album. That was already written and recorded. Gary Moore had done a short stint with Phil just prior to me and Brian getting in. So it was already done.
We recorded some demos down in Morley, in the studio in Morley, and when Gary was in the band, and that was one of the tunes that came out of that session. And Gary's solo was so spectacular, we decided to record it, you know, properly. And we decided to keep Gary's solo, but re-record the backing track. So I had to go out and sort of overdub the drums, and Phil had to overdub the bass, keep Gary's solo. Phil did a new vocal, and that was the studio version. That's how that happened, you know.
For the live version, Phil, insisted that Brian, you know, copy Gary's solo sort of note for note, and Brian was not happy with that at all. Although he appreciated how good the solo was, you know, Brian was his own guy, so he did copy it, you know, note for note, but in a Brian-esque kind of way. He took it and then he expanded it, and then he made that solo his own. Right. And then there was, you know, the end of the solo or the end of the song, and then I'm just off kind of doing my thing. So it was a little easier for me because I had nothing to come up against. You know, I was able to have a free hand and just, you know, whatever I wanted to come up with, you know, I could do. So, you know, Brian's spot in that song was a little tougher, but like I say, he took the solo and he throughout the years he actually made it his own solo.
And it was one of those settler songs, I call them, because you stick it in around the middle of the set, and if you're having a really bad gig up to then, that song will put you right back on track. You know, because we never did a bad version of that, I don't think, the whole time we were together. And it always had that excitement. So, and that would actually pull you back up there and like, oh, right, next song, get it right, you know.
don't believe me, I tell you. I'm worried this is true.
Don't Believe a Word was another shuffle, blues shuffle, you know. And Phil again came up with these fantastic lyrics. I remember one stage there, you know, some of the early lyrics, you know, didn't sound too good. And I think we all said, you know, I think you can come up with something better there, Phil, you know. And he turned around and said, yeah, but alternative lyrics here, how about trying this, you know? So he got his book out and came out with a set of alternative lyrics and just suited the song perfectly, you know. So that's how that happened. But I mean, it's a really good shuffle, good feel to that song. Yeah, I like it.
Still a great song. That was a very weird song to write because we were in a farmhouse rehearsing in the middle of nowhere, and Phil came in with this song, the acoustic, and don't believe in, and he did it real slow, like slow blues. And I said, that's crap, Phil. It's just a slow blues. It's crap. So he went into one, ran off, disappeared for about 3 days. This is the middle of nowhere. He doesn't drive or anything. I kind of knew where he was, so I think he was having a liaison with the pub landlord's daughter down the road, so he went and stayed there. But he came back eventually, and in the interim period, I said to Downey, when I was sitting in there, he's getting really cheesed off. Where's that bloody fella? I said, well, look, he's obviously cheesed off about me saying we weren't going to do it. So let's try and do it another way then. So I thought I'll do a riff on it. Downey came up with, let's do a shuffle on it. I said, great. And then I wrote the riff. And then he came back in and he was all, oh, that's cool. So I think it turned out better the way it was. But again, that's another example of the band putting stuff in and possibly not getting the recognition they should. Because we'd never got done if Downey hadn't suggested the shuffle,
I think Are You Ready? It was one of those kind of sound check things, somebody starts a groove and you just up and away and you're doing it, and after a while you realize, hey, that's kind of a cool groove. Let's kind of hone in on this a little bit. And, well, let's try this. I got this riff over here, and then everybody starts throwing their ideas in, and then it becomes this song, And it actually, the phrase "Are you ready?" seems to me after that became this phrase that a lot of other bands started to use. Just, hey, are you ready?
Yeah, that was just something to put on the end of the set that sort of was fast-paced and hard, which it is, so that worked quite well.
It was a kind of a showstopper, There was not much went into that song. It was just sort of knocked out in about an hour or so, We actually wrote it fairly quickly. Sha-La-La came about because I was sort of trying to get a sound in the studio, and I kept playing the bass drums, with a double bass drum beat, which was da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da, right? And for the sound engineer to get a good sound. But I started playing a solo over these double bass drum beats, just to warm up, basically. And Phil said, that's pretty good. Well, let's write a song around that. So he came up with the Sha-La-La lyrics, and I need a riff as well. And I just kept that beat going, and obviously rearranged it a little bit. And then the solo, there's a little solo in the middle, which is about like 10 bars, 12 bars long. And then the melody comes back in, and then at the end, it sort of ends off with me playing a major solo, But in the studio, it was a fairly short solo, because the time factor was so for the album was so short that we had to sort of cut the solo down, right? Which was okay, But I did a long solo when we recorded Live and Dangerous, so that sort of compensated for that.
That was a great song live, because I could go take a break. I felt Brian was an incredible drummer with just amazing stamina. You would be up there for 2.5 hours. Now all of a sudden he's got to do this drum solo that lasts for God knows how long, right? And you're beat, you're dripping with sweat, and you're tired out, and you think, thank God, man, the drum solo, right? You go off to the side, and you're having a cigarette and a drink, and you see a poor old Brian, man, he's just hammering away, and all you can think of is, man, I'm glad I didn't take up drums.
There's certain drummers that I would always love to play with. Brian comes kind of top of the list. maybe Simon Kirk after that, because he's great to play with. But Downey has his own distinct style, because he's kind of jazz in a way, you know.
I was very influenced by a few drummers. Pete Gavin from Heads, Hands and Feet was a really good drummer, and I got to know him quite well. And he had an excellent double bass drum technique. So, you know, I used to go to lots of their gigs in the Lyceum and places like that in London to check him out. Obviously, Ginger Baker was another double bass drum expert, you know. So lots of good players around there where you could sort of study, you know, you could look and see what they were doing. But my solo, I just wanted to keep it sort of full on from start to finish. You know, no sort of lulls in the solo, just to keep it very sort of hard edged all the way through. And it was quite, you know, it was quite hard to do, but eventually, after lots of practice, I got it, you know. But again, you know, that was sort of incorporated into the set, and it became a really sort of popular tune.
Baby Drives Me Crazy was, after about 3 years, we came up with this song. We need a big ending kind of song, something that's really going to slay him towards the end, right? And it never got recorded. It was never put on an album. It was strictly just a live song, a really good time, end of set kind of song. And yeah, I guess, you know, he, at that point, we did use that song as the introduction of the band, but, you know, we tried that kind of thing in a lot of different songs. So where are we going to introduce the band? What song were you going to use it on? And Baby Drives Me Crazy became, you know, the obvious one to do that with after a while. So I guess we used that song for 4 years, and then we just dropped it and never played it again. You know, it's strange how songs like that happen. It just boom, it just falls off the edge of the earth, and never to be seen again. Me and the boys were wondering what you and the girls were doing tonight. That's another one that never got recorded. It was specifically written just to play live. Yeah, it was all a planned thing. You know, you've got to have you know, an idea what you're going to be doing. Okay, well, that's the end of the set. Boom, proper, come off. We're gonna. This is what the encore is going to be. Then we'll come off, right? And then this is what the second encore is going to be. You know, not because, you know, we expected to get all these encores, but there had to be some sort of, if it was going to happen, you needed some sort of plan to think, instead of, oh geez, should we play Rosalie again or something, which would look kind of pokey.
Me and the boys, you get a second win when you start playing that, you know, because it's another up-tempo shuffle, you know, which have double bass drums as well. And, you know, at that stage, you know, everybody was on their feet, you know, ready to rock, you know, so you know, it was just a spontaneous song, you know, that just took off, you know, and Phil put, you know, some great lyrics in there, you know, just to get all the crowd going. And it's a fairly simple song, actually. There's nothing really much to it, apart from the tempo, which is kind of fairly fast. But yeah, it's a great song to play. There was definitely gigs we played better, but there was no recording equipment there. So, you know, I've got some sort of bootlegs that sound really, really good, you know. But I mean, it did capture the essence of the band, you know.
Very influential, I think the band was at that point up till Live and Dangerous. And I think basically if we were all still the same, it wouldn't have changed. It was just that chemistry that was working.
For its time, I think it did exactly what it was supposed to do. Like I say, we needed a vehicle to show everybody what we thought Thin Lizzy was all about. And the Live and Dangerous album did exactly that. And we all walked away. It was probably really the first album that I had walked away after Tony Visconti had actually mixed it. I walked away totally happy. You know, that's a cool album. That's an album I'm really proud of. And when people ask me what's your favorite album, that's the one I always say.